Well, my earliest experience of God, in the way that I now understand God, was here on the banks of Ganga. When I first came to India 25 years ago, when I first came to India 25 years ago, and I stood on the banks of Mother Ganga. Those of you who have been coming to satsang for a while or who know me know that I was never a very religious person at all. But I also wasn't one of those people who say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. So I really never had any experience of God in the way that I now understand God, until I arrived here and stood on the banks of Ganga and had this incredible experience. I was 25, a scientist, an academic who had arrived here with a backpack, didn't know I was looking for God, didn't come consciously seeking. And yet the experience was so powerful of suddenly being in the presence of the divine. But what was amazing was it was an experience that was not only outside of me. It wasn't like, oh wow, now I am in the presence of God who is over there. But it was in the presence of God that is, yes, over there, and yes, over here, and yes, over here, and yes, in here. It was an experience of God everywhere. The closest I had ever come to that before coming to India was when I was in the mountains in the woods. I never would have articulated it as an experience of God because I wasn't religious, but I felt an experience of my capital S self, that true self, that expansive, unbounded self. And I remember the first time of running through the mountains, and that experience as I ran through the mountains of like every bit of my identity. At that time I was a teenager, but every bit of my identity just fell along the sides of the trail that I was running along. Like there goes this piece, there goes this piece, there goes this, there goes that. And in just a few minutes, I had this experience of being just one with all. Just merging into existence. But again, I never would have called it an experience of God, because I wasn't religious, and because the religious training that I came from, I was raised in a Jewish family. The religious teaching that I came from was not one that prepared me for, oh, this is what God feels like. Nobody ever said when you experience God, it feels like you melt and you merge and you become one, a drop in the ocean. Nobody ever said it feels like unbounded, beginningless, endless, bottomless, topless love. So when I had the experience, it never occurred to me, oh, this is God. I just thought, I really love being in the mountains. And I really got to get back into the mountains. And I just ran to the mountains at every possible opportunity that I had. But then when I came here at 25 and had this experience, it undoubtedly was God. So it wasn't one that I had had earlier in childhood. And on some levels, I wish, God, you think, why, wouldn't that have been amazing to have had an experience like this? You wish, God, when I was 2 or 3 or 4, if I had had that experience. And yet, the power and the transformation and the healing of having that experience at 25 was actually something that I wouldn't trade. Because I had built up so much false identity, so much ego, so much ignorance, that the power when it hit me was so much that it was like this explosion, implosion, melting, merging all at once that was so powerful. So it seems like a win-win. If you have it in very, very early childhood, you win because you don't ever waste those years developing ego and ignorance. And if you don't have it till later in life, well, you also win because it's this extraordinary experience of undoing everything you've built. It's like as kids when we would play with Legos or with blocks or building card houses. There was something very, very powerful about building this entire structure as high as you could get, only then just to go and knock the whole thing down. And to an adult perspective, you'd think, well, why do you bother spending so much time building that thing up if you're just going to take so much joy in knocking it all down again? But in the same way, for me, it felt like that with the ego structures that had been created was, wow, yeah, they were difficult and challenging, and yet, wow, it was so extraordinary to feel them crumble, to feel them topple over. Are there any questions that anyone here has? Yes.
It's because I'm very interested in the kind of routine, like
The food kind of?
routine, like the sadhana you're having.
Sure.
So can you share maybe the best tips for morning rituals, evening rituals, things like that?
Absolutely. So routine is really important. Now, if God is everywhere, and God is on 24/7, and we are one with God 24/7, then of course the question becomes, well, why Brahma Muhurt? Why get up early? Why meditate? Why do anything at a certain time if God is always there and we're always one with God? It's not that we need a routine for God. It's that when we don't have a routine and we sit to meditate, most of us notice that if you're meditating for the first time in a while, it's a lot harder to get there. It takes a lot longer to still the mind. It takes a lot longer to experience that oneness. Our minds are creatures of habit. So if every morning you get up and you have a cup of tea or you have a cup of coffee at 6:30, 7, 8, 9, whatever time you have it, you'll notice that about 5-10 minutes before you have it, the mind starts going, my coffee is coming, my tea is coming. And if for whatever reason it doesn't come on time, or you can't have it, the mind is very restless. So we're creatures of habit. Or if you've got a habit of getting up in the morning and first thing you open your WhatsApp or you open your Facebook or whatever your habit may be, and you get up in the morning and your phone battery is dead or Facebook is down or whatever it may be, you're very restless. Not just because you can't have a cup of coffee or get online, but because it has disrupted your routine. The mind is set in a certain way, you disrupt it, and it gets very upset. Now, when we develop a routine of prayer, of japa, of meditation, of yoga, of exercise, of being with loved ones, of taking a walk, whatever we put into our routine, it actually gets a lot easier to follow as the days go by because the mind gets set into it. And anybody who's tried to develop a meditation practice knows it's a struggle in the beginning. Not only in the beginning, but especially in the beginning, because all of our instincts are pushing against it. If we have it in the morning, the mind is like, oh my God, I've got to sleep. If we have it a little bit later, the mind is like, oh my God, I've got too much to do. So the mind is always pushing against it. And so if you can get it into a routine, the mind will open and expand to create space now. Oh, this is the routine. And the mind will settle around the routine such that that resistance is no longer there. The mind knows, this is what we do. Every time we sit to meditate, there's an element of clearing away that which is not self, whether through a very specific practice of a neti-neti meditation technique, or whether through just a few moments of anchoring and grounding. But the more infrequently we do it, the more haphazardly we do it, the more those layers of ignorance have time to grow. It's the same reason that we tend to, clean up once a day. You sweep the floor once a day. You clean your table once a day, at least. Because if you don't, then by the time you go in to clean it, there's a lot of dust. And if you can just keep it clean, a quick sweep of it makes it so much easier to live with. And our mind is the same. If you only clear through the muck haphazardly, you're going to find yourself living in a lot of muck. It's like anybody here have a swimming pool? Anybody? Swimming pool? Okay, a few people. If you have a swimming pool, what you know is that on the swimming pool, you get these layers of muck that have to be cleaned off. And if you wait too long to clean them off, the swimming pool becomes gross to swim in. So we go in and they clean it frequently so that it stays clean. It's the same with the mind. if we're not cleaning it frequently, removing that which is not self, when we go in to pray or meditate, the mind is full of muck. So, as far as the best routine is really just one you can follow. If you set a routine that you're not going to be able to follow, it doesn't matter how good it looks on paper. If you can't do it, it's not a good routine. So if you tend to be someone who's used to waking up at 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock, don't set a routine immediately for getting up at 4. You're just setting yourself up for failure. And then once you miss your getting up time, then the whole routine that you've set up, it's like a bag of dominoes. It's like if you're on a diet and you say, okay, no more sugar. And then you have one cookie. What happens? Anybody ever stop at one cookie? The only people who stop with one cookie are people who are not on diets. It's very ironic. Not on diets, one cookie, no problem, great. On a diet, one cookie, the mind goes, well, I've ruined today anyway, I might as well eat the whole bag. We'll start again tomorrow. And this is what happens with our routine. So if you set up something that says 4 a.m. and you snooze, and you go back to sleep for a few hours, the mind is going to say, today is ruined anyway. Tomorrow, 4 a.m. Instead, set it at a reasonable time. Set it at 6. 6:30 if 6 seems too daunting. Do that for a few weeks or a month. Then set it half an hour earlier. Give it a few weeks, set it half an hour earlier. You want to begin your morning, or I should say for me, I begin my morning with a gratitude practice. Before I even get out of bed. Literally, this is my lying in bed practice. Just 5 things. Sometimes the mind keeps going and it's more than 5, but at least 5 things that you are grateful for. 5 things. They may be new and creative each day, may be the same each day, it doesn't matter. As long as you feel them in your heart. Did your eyes open? Can you see out of them? Are your legs able to stand and carry you? Do you have water running out of a tap that you can turn on? Is there someone, somewhere in the world, maybe in your bed, maybe in your home, maybe thousands of miles away, who you love and who loves you, and who sees you? Are you free to worship, to love, however you want? I mean, I'm just throwing out some very general ones. If you've got those, you are more blessed, luckier than 99% of people in the world. So gratitude. And then after gratitude, and after you finish your morning, shower, brushing, whatever, prayer and meditation. Do some pranayama, centers you. Do some japa, some chanting of a mantra. And then meditation. And I do it in that order because it helps the mind come in. The pranayama, then the japa. They lead so seamlessly into meditation that it's just like 1 minute you're doing your pranayama, the next minute you're chanting your mantra, and then you're just automatically meditating. And then at some point in the day, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe later in the day, work in some kind of practice for your body. Yoga, walking, some other exercise. Keeping the body healthy and strong. At night before you sleep, again, gratitude practice. Some meditation, and then gratitude, or gratitude then meditation, either way. But just ending the day again with how blessed you are. And you'll find that it transforms you. It's transformed me. And obviously in the routine, you want there to be flexibility. Not enough flexibility that the mind is like, oh, I don't know, today, maybe not. But flexibility in that, there are nights you're awake really, really, really late for some reason, that you may need a little bit more sleep, no problem. Be flexible. But be flexible in the way that you stay with the routine even if a little bit of it got off. So okay, maybe you got up at 6:30 or 7 instead of earlier. But whenever you get up, start with your gratitude and your meditation whenever it is. So keep the routine even if pieces of it get knocked off. Early morning flight, no problem. Meditate on the plane. So this is how to bring that routine into our daily lives. And you'll see it transforms you. Sure, no problem. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. No problem, of course. You'll see it absolutely transforms you. So it's something that takes a little while to get going, but once you do, it becomes your best friend. Beautiful. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I started meditation very early age. In the beginning, my mind was going everywhere, whichever even you don't think about. But at certain point, I start feeling that, I don't even feel body anymore, like when I sit down. But at the same time, there are certain time comes when my anger is so high that, I cannot control it. So it's totally, both are so opposite, and it's not easy to balance it. So what can we do in this kind of situation?
So anger or other, we could call them negative thought patterns. They're habits, they're patterns. They're things we need to work with. The more we allow ourselves to go in that direction, the more we go in that direction. It's the nature of the mind. Remember I said it's a creature of habit. If you find that it goes in the direction of anger and you allow it to keep going, it'll keep going. Instead, what you want to do is you want to give it something different to do. Now, sometimes in our lives, there are actually things we need to look at. A specific pain that is causing anger that we need to look at face to face, deal with, take care of, maybe have a conversation with someone, maybe go within and forgive. So sometimes there's actually actions that need to be taken in order to free ourselves of these patterns. But a lot of times there isn't. A lot of times they've become just that, habits. We go in that direction. We're not angry at one thing, we're just kind of angry in general at everything. We're not jealous about just one thing, we're sort of in general jealous and competitive. We're not negative about one thing, we're just in general habitually negative. It becomes simply a habit. And this is where you want to just give yourself a much better habit. But it takes practice. It takes practice. This is where in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagwan Krishna emphasizes abhyas. Abhyas means practice. And he emphasizes abhyas so much. Practice. Keep practicing. Keep practicing. Yes, that is the nature of the mind. It's like a monkey. And in this case, a monkey, throwing a temper tantrum. Practice. Practice. This is the role of mantra. This is the role of prayer. This is the role of mindfulness. See, if I am mindful of my breath, fully mindful of my breath in this moment, I can't be angry. Because the mind can't do two things simultaneously. So it can't be telling me a story about why I'm angry at you and being aware of my breath at the same time. I cannot be fully mindful in the moment and judging this one, being negative about this one, jealous of this one, competing with this one. And so this is where our practices give us mindfulness. Stay mindful. And again, it's a practice, abhyas. We expect it to happen suddenly. I can't tell you how many times I've had people in satsang all over the world. Somebody will raise their hand and say, okay, so what's the bare minimum I need to do every day? Like, is there a 5-7 minute option? And I laugh because we're looking for an immediate magic wand. Everything else in life we understand, we need to practice, we need to give it time. But our spiritual practices, it's like, what do you mean I can't do it in 5 minutes? Abhyas, practice. So every time you find the mind going in anger, just bring it back. Just bring it back. Problem is we love it. Problem is the ego loves it. Because see, the more I am negative about other people in my mind, the better I feel about myself. It's a very, very cheap and very shallow self-esteem booster. And it doesn't work for very long. But it's this very quick, cheap boost of my self-esteem if I can just think of something negative about someone else. For a brief moment, I feel better because I'm better than they are. But it's cheap. And it's shallow. And it doesn't actually work. And all it does is separate us from our true self. So as the mind goes in anger, just be like, enough of your cheap tricks. I know I'm full and whole and divine. I don't need to hold grudges about other people. I don't need to lose myself. Just bring the mind back. Back to your breath, back to a mantra, back to the present moment. And slowly, slowly, as a creature of habit, it'll stop going in that direction. It's just practice. Yeah, we'll take yours last. Yavia.
I would like to know your insight on how to communicate with people that you're continuously like you're in a direct contact with them all the time, people living with you, your partner or your family members, who might not really understand your journey of
To stay
self-realization.
connected with them.
To stay connected with them. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, this is very, very frequent. In a family, whether a family of origin, family of blood, or whether a family we've chosen into, a married family. Here's what's beautiful. In order to stay connected, my mind does not actually have to understand your mind. It's nice if they do, we have more to talk about, more to share, but it isn't required for a heart-to-heart connection. Those of you who have ever been in places where you don't speak the language, as I look around and I look at my non-Indian sisters and brothers, well, even without asking for a show of hands, I can be sure knowing that every one of you has had a moment, probably many moments, of a heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection with someone in this country with whom you couldn't communicate a word. Right? It's not, oh, I have to learn the language, then I can connect with people. Even not being able to understand a word, the heart connects. So yes, obviously we're able to dive into much deeper conversations when we speak the language. Whether the literal language of Hindi or English, or whether the language of your spiritual practice, your path. But don't be attached to that, because it may or may not ever happen. But one thing is for sure, as you drop deeper into it, as you expand more and more deeply into it, as your heart expands, it's able to connect more and more with other people's hearts. And even though they may not understand your path, they will feel it. It's what happened with my parents. To this day, neither of them gets it, but they feel it. They get it on that level. It's transformed them. They couldn't tell you anything specific about it. They're not walking it the way I am walking it. But it doesn't matter. Because even though meditation or oneness with God is not on the list of topics we can, have conversations about, we're able to connect on that level. I feel it. I know they feel it. They would use different words to describe it. And that's okay. So don't be limited in your thinking that someone has to actually understand my path. Philosophically, semantically, in a values or ethics way, or a priorities way, in order to stay connected. The only thing that breaks the connection is when you get stuck in your box of, I'm the one on a spiritual path, and you people are the ones who don't get it yet. That creates separation. And they'll feel that. They'll feel the separation. They'll feel the ego distance. They'll feel the condescension. They'll feel that sense of you looking down upon them. So don't let that happen to you. Remember, the deeper you go on your spiritual path, the more and more open you are to others. The more you're able to see the divine in them. So let your practice be to open to them, whatever their path may be, to connect on a heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul level, with no judgment, no agenda, no attachment. And slowly, slowly, no guarantees, but it's very likely that they will come closer to the path because the truth is a magnet. And if you really live it and embody it, they will want some of what you have. And automatically it will draw them towards you. Not because you have to convince them or teach them or show them, but just because it's a magnet. And their practice may be different, their philosophy may be different, but that's okay. You can sit together in that divine presence, even if your inner experience is one thing and their inner experience is a different thing. Ultimately, on the deepest level, you're meeting at the same place. So yeah, just feel and find the connection more here than up here. Imagine you were trying to connect and love with people where you didn't even speak the same language, right? What do you have to do with the eyes? I mean, COVID gave us such a beautiful opportunity to learn how to smile with our eyes. I mean, it was beautiful. No longer could you smile, no longer could you see facial expressions. And we had to learn how to love people through our eyes. And it's such an extraordinary skill and practice. So imagine that you're connecting with people, you've got masks on, they don't speak the same language. Can you just connect energetically? Can you connect in the eyes, from the heart, accepting them fully, wherever they are? Beautiful. Yeah. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, and a beautiful morning and day to our family joining from all over the world. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So much love.